money, cash, dinero, cheese, all lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when someone's daughter got kidnapped. Only the bingo-loving, knife addict, dog-saving, no overtime for him, Leon S. Kennedy, can save the world. In this video, I will be discussing how successful Resident Evil 4 was for Capcom by taking a look at their sales and other statistics. On January 11, 2005, the world changed forever when Resident Evil 4 was released on GameCube. According to Capcom, Resident Evil 4 sold 1.6 million copies on GameCube. Later that year, it was released on PS2 to a much larger 2.3 million copies sold. Although the PlayStation 2 version sold significantly more than the GameCube, Capcom never had any regrets on the GameCube version. I took a look at their 2005 annual report, which, if you don't know, is a report that must be available to the public by every company sold on the stock market. That's why they're called public companies. Here is a quote from the 2005 annual report when discussing Resident Evil 4. The latest of the series, Resident Evil 4, also experienced a healthy growth supported by the established brand power and core users. In overseas markets, Resident Evil 4, Devil May Cry 3, and Resident Evil Outbreak favorably increased their sales in general, backed by the steady US and Europe markets. Although it didn't sell as well as the PS2 version, the GameCube launch was never considered a failure when it was mentioned in the report. Resident Evil 4 would continue to be released on other systems. Capcom has released sales for other systems as well. The Wii version sold 2 million. The PlayStation 4, Xbox One version of the game has sold 1.6 million copies. You may be wondering where PC, PS3, and Xbox 360 sales are at. Capcom categorizes them as DL, which stands for full game download and includes PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, and all digital download units on PC. DL is accounted for with the PS4, Xbox One versions, that 1.6 million copies. When combining all these sales, the grand total for Resident Evil 4 is 7.5 million copies sold. Before we continue with the video, I wanted to let you know that I've given you a bunch of numbers, and I'm going to keep giving you even more numbers soon, but I wanted to assure you that I'm not making these up. All these numbers come from sources which are in the description below. You can check them out as you like. 7.5 million sold sounds like a lot, but with nothing to compare it to, we can't be sure. Thankfully, Capcom has listed the sales of all their best-selling games. Capcom separates them by system, but I have aggregated all the various system sales to give you a grand total of the games, similar to Resident Evil 4's 7.5 million. Here is the ranking for the best-selling Resident Evil games. At number 1, the best-selling Resident Evil game of all time, it's Resident Evil 5 at a crazy 11.5 million copies sold. Number 2, Resident Evil 6 at 9.3 million copies sold. Number 3, the legendary Resident Evil 4 at 7.5 million. Number 4, Resident Evil 7 at 7 million copies. Number 5, the Resident Evil 2 remake at 5.8 million copies sold so far. I have decided to separate the remake and the original. Although they are similar, I consider them different games. Number 6, the OG original Resident Evil at 5.08 million. Number 7, the OG Resident Evil 2 at 4.96 million. Number 8, the Resident Evil 1 remake at $3.75 million. Number 9, the OG Resident Evil 3 at $3.5 million. Sales for the new Resident Evil 3 remake have understandably not been released yet. It came out a month ago at time of writing. As such, it does not make the list. And number 10, Resident Evil Code Veronica at 2.54 million copies sold. Comment below on what you think of this ranking. Did your favorite make the list? Among its brothers and sisters, the legend Resident Evil 4 is dominant. It's the third most successful Resident Evil game of all time. What about all of Capcom? How does Resident Evil 4 stack up against Capcom's other successful franchise, Monster Hunter? I made a list of Capcom's all-time best-selling games. Here is the top 5. I have never played Monster Hunter before, and I never knew how popular it was. Monster Hunter World at 14.9 million is ridiculous. Capcom is swimming in money right now. I decided to combine the sales of Monster Hunter 4 and its ultimate counterpart, and Generations and its ultimate counterpart, since I consider them the same games but enhanced. These numbers have gotten me interested in Monster Hunter, and I have ordered my copy of Monster Hunter 4 for the Nintendo 3DS. I can't wait to play it. This data reveals that Resident Evil 4 is Capcom's 5th best-selling game of all time. In my research for Resident Evil sales, I found a tweet from a video game industry analyst, the NPD Group. The tweet ranks the best-selling survival horror games of all time. The ranking from the tweet and the sales data from Capcom are slightly different. The top games are the same, but they are in a different order. For example, Capcom's data puts Resident Evil 4 in the number 3 slot, while the tweet's ranking puts the game at number 2. I'm not sure what the discrepancy is, but I'm sticking with Capcom's numbers in this situation, as they are the ones, of all people, that would know how to track their sales. Let's go back to the initial launch of Resident Evil 4, with the GameCube and the PS2. In the 2005 annual report, Resident Evil 4 is not mentioned a lot. This is because by this point, Capcom had only released the GameCube version. You may be wondering how that is possible when the PS2 version was also released in 2005. It's this way because Capcom's fiscal year ends on March 31st. The 2005 annual report is actually from April 1st, 2004 through March 31st, 2005. It's confusing as most of the annual report is from 2004, but it's labeled as 2005 to coincide with the final day of their fiscal year. Only the GameCube version is included in the 2005 annual report. I took a look at their 2006 annual report, and Resident Evil 4 is the star of the company. A year prior, Mega Man was on the front page. Now it's Leon and Ashley taking center stage in 2006. I bring this up because this is usually a sign of a successful product, since the company is willing to choose them to represent the company. Here is a table of Capcom's net sales and net income from 2003 through 2006 using their annual report. If you're not business savvy, I'm going to make things simple. Net sales is basically the money coming in, and net income is the money after taking account for expenses. You can see a trend of growth of the company during this time. In 2003 and 2004, net income was negative, but by 2005, Capcom managed to turn it around, which coincidentally is when the GameCube version was released. However, Capcom said this was due to their corporate structural reforms. By 2006, they nearly doubled their net income. This is a big deal. This is the same year that the PS2 version was released. This time, Capcom said it was Resident Evil 4 that drove their successful net income. Here is a quote. As a result of the Capcom's development structure to deploy personnel to the development process, we were able to achieve huge successes during this fiscal year with such hits as Monster Hunter Freedom and Resident Evil 4. Furthermore, they added Resident Evil 4 showed favorable growth with sales of 1.81 million units and continued strength as one of our key software titles and established brands. Consequently, Capcom broke all previous sales records and has shipped out 3 million units of the software globally to date. By now, the numbers and statements from Capcom speak for themselves. When it was released, Resident Evil 4 was the most successful game in Capcom's history. Now, it's the third most successful game in terms of sales. I recently got Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation 4 and played it for the first time. If you want to see my experience playing the game, check out my channel or the card above. The data that I have given you reveals that not only was Resident Evil 4 one of the most critically acclaimed titles of all time, but they were money-making, cash-making, dinero-making, cheese-making machines. Now it's time to answer the question of the video. How successful was Resident Evil 4 for Capcom? Very successful.